Beneath a merciless, icy storm on a forsaken mountain pass, a mother German shepherd lay shivering at the edge of life. Her body curled protectively around two fragile puppies lost to the world, fading into the relentless snow. Yet a mourning Marine, chasing shadows of his past, recognized the fierce spirit burning in her amber eyes. The veteran declared her too shattered to mend. The law deemed her too perilous to survive, but he gambled his freedom to pull her from the brink, unaware that one day she'd plunge into darkness to rescue him. What unfolded between them was a miracle beyond understanding. Before we dive in, tell me where in the world you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe broken souls can heal, tap that subscribe button, because this story might just reignite your faith in miracles. The wind howled fiercely through the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains, a piercing wail like a warning more than weather's roar. Though late afternoon, the sky above Loveland Pass had already surrendered to a storm-darkened gray. Snow didn't simply fall here. It was swept sideways by fierce gusts pushing 50 miles per hour, transforming the treacherous, winding road into a suffocating tunnel of swirling white. Inside the cabin of a weather-beaten 2008 Ford F-150, the heater clattered desperately, losing its war against the ruthless Colorado cold. Elias Thorne held the wheel with hands like worn leather, scarred, hardened, unwavering. He was 55, yet the deep battles etched in his eyes and the gray stubble framing his rugged jaw aged him far beyond his years, clad in a faded olive drab jacket much worn like his own weary frame. Today was Thanksgiving. Below in the valley, within warm, glowing homes of Denver families carved turkeys and debated football fervently. Elias knew this without looking. His phone had buzzed 3 times in the past hour. It was his daughter, Clara, pleading for him to stop punishing himself, begging him to come back from his isolation and into the warmth. But he ignored the calls. He hungered not for turkey, but for atonement. The truck's tires scraped across ice as Elias downshifted the engine, growling reluctant protests. He knew every twist of this pass. He was familiar with every fragile guardrail, every steep drop plunging 2,000 feet into the abyss. Yet he sought one particular place, a cursed stretch mile marker, 108. A sharp, blind curve wrapping the granite cliff locals called the Devil's Elbow. Elias eased the truck onto the narrow, snow-packed shoulder. His headlights cut a path through the swirling white, revealing a solitary pine standing guard at the cliff's edge. 5 years ago today, on this very bend, his world ended not with an explosion, but metal's scream and the crushing silence that followed. It was here Titan died. Not just any dog, Titan was a Belgian Malinois, 70 pounds of raw power and fearless teeth, a canine partner who'd dragged Elias from a burning Humvee in Kandahar. Together they retired, meant to grow old side by side, but a drunk driver on ice shattered that promise in an instant. Elias killed the engine. Silence surged in, dense and choking, broken only by the wind rocking the truck. He inhaled, watching his breath fog in the frigid air, and opened the door. The cold hit him like a fierce blow. A hammer blow to his chest ripped the breath from his lungs. He stepped out, boots sinking deep into 6 inches of fresh, untouched snow. He moved toward the tree, his steps stiff and weighed down. It wasn't just the biting wind he battled, it was the haunting memories lurking in the shadows. Reaching into his pocket, he drew out a worn, weathered dog tag. He hung it gently on a low pine branch alongside the faded tags from years long gone. "Happy Thanksgiving, buddy." Elias whispered, his voice rough, grinding like gravel beneath his words. "I miss you." He lingered there, letting the cold seep deep into his bones. Embracing the pain, it was the only thing that still felt real to him. Just as he turned to leave, a flash of color snapped his attention. About 20 yards down the road, just beyond the bend where plow trucks had piled a wall of dirty snow. That morning, the radio had reported a pileup near the pass. The police had cleared the wreckage hours ago, towing away the crushed sedan, salting the cold asphalt. The place should have been deserted, but something was breaking through the pristine white of the snowbank. Elias squinted, brushing ice from his lashes. It looked like a dark mound of fur, maybe a tire tread, a discarded jacket. His gut clenched. That old instinct, the one that kept him alive back in the desert, flickered to life. Something was terribly wrong. He pushed forward, battling the wind that tried to shove him toward the cliff's edge. As he neared, the shape became clear. It wasn't a jacket. It was a dog, a large male German shepherd, black and tan, lying motionless on its side, its fur crusted with ice and blood. Elias knelt down, ignoring the soaking snow that chilled through his jeans. He placed a hand on the animal's flank, ice cold. Rigor mortis had already taken hold. The dog had likely been thrown from a car during the crash, dead on impact, then buried beneath the careless sweep of a snowplow clearing the site. "Damn it," Elias cursed under his breath. "Sorry, boy. You never deserved to be left like garbage." He readied himself to stand, planning to call highway patrol for the body, when a low, trembling sound stopped him cold. It wasn't the wind. It was a growl. Elias froze, eyes scanning the frozen scene. The growl was faint, wet, desperate. It came from behind the fallen male. Elias shifted, digging into the snowbank to clear the drift. As the snow slid away, his heart pounded in his chest. Curled tightly behind the male's lifeless body was another shepherd, smaller with a coat of silver and sable. She was alive, but barely. Her eyes glazed, struggling to stay open, rimmed with ice. She trembled violently as if convulsing, but it wasn't just for herself. Tucked close to her belly, shielded from the biting wind by her weakening frame, were two tiny puppies, not more than 8 weeks old, dark-furred balls, silent and still. The female bared her teeth at Elias, a pitiful warning. She lacked the strength to lift her head, but the message was unmistakable. Stay back. Even at death's door, she stood her ground. Elias felt the ice around his heart crack open after 5 long years. He looked back at the dead male, likely their father then, to the mother who'd dragged herself and her pups behind his body, using her mate as a shield against the merciless storm. "Easy, Mama," Elias whispered, his voice softening into a calming, comforting tone. Elias spoke with the steady, rhythmic cadence he'd always used with Titan. "I'm not your enemy. Stand down." The mother dog's eyes flickered briefly, not with aggression, but with raw terror. Beneath that fear lay a deep resignation that Elias instantly recognized. He had seen that same look in young Marines bleeding out on distant battlefields, the gaze of someone who knew their final moment had come. She let out a soft, broken whimper, her head dropping onto the cold snow. Her shivering slowed, an ominous sign that her body was surrendering to the cold. Hypothermia was tightening its ruthless grip. Elias glanced at the puppies. One of them stirred the faint twitch of an ear, a defiant spark. "Not on my watch." With a fierce snarl at the howling storm, Elias moved with surprising agility despite his age. He ripped off his heavy field jacket. The biting wind instantly tore at his exposed flannel shirt and raw skin. He didn't care. He spread the jacket on the snowy ground. Quick and gentle, he scooped up the tiny puppy's icy little bundles of fur, as cold as frozen stones. Slipping them deep inside his flannel shirt pressed tight against his chest, he buttoned it halfway up to trap his warmth around them. Then he faced the mother dog. "I'm going to hurt you, and I'm sorry," he murmured. Carefully, he slid his arms under her. She let out a heart-wrenching whimper, a sound of pure suffering, as he lifted her heavy, lifeless weight. Beneath the fur, he could feel the sharp outlines of her ribs, starvation etched into her frame. Wrapping her in the remainder of his jacket, he swaddled her like a fragile child. The wind roared louder, as though furious at him for stealing its claim. Straining with every muscle, Elias lifted himself upright. He was bearing nearly 80 pounds of dog, plus the puppies carrying them close against his chest, along a treacherous, icy highway during the storm. He stepped forward. His boot slipped. Catching himself, he ground his heel into the frozen ground. "Come on, Thorn," he growled through clenched teeth. "Keep moving." The 20 yards back to the truck felt endless, like navigating 20 meters through quicksand. His arms burned with strain, the bitter cold turning his fingers into stiff, useless claws. The mother's head lolled against his shoulder, her breath shallow and ragged. Reaching the truck, his hands full, he couldn't open the door. He balanced carefully on the ice, jerking the handle open with his elbow. The door creaked ajar. He didn't place them in the truck bed, they wouldn't survive there. Clearing the passenger seat of gear and old coffee cups, he gently laid the mother dog down inside. She didn't move. Unbuttoning his flannel, he gingerly pulled out the puppies. They were limp, lifeless. Cradling them against their mother's belly, he tightened the jacket around them, all cocooning this fragile family. Elias slipped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut against the roaring storm. Silence returned inside the cab, now thick with the scent of damp fur and the sharp metallic sting of blood. He turned the heater dial until it snapped off in his hand. He fired up the engine, watching the temperature gauge flicker upward. Glancing at the passenger seat, the mother dog's eyes remained closed. Her chest barely rose with each shallow breath. Elias shifted into gear, his hands trembling not merely from cold, but from adrenaline, a sudden violent blend of past battles and present pain. He was no longer just a lonely man visiting a grave. He was Sergeant Elias once more with a mission. He looked at the fading mother, her fur matted with melting snow, dirty water pooling on the upholstery beneath her. "Hold on," Elias whispered fiercely, his voice cutting through the crackling heater. "You hear me? No one gets left behind. Not today." He slammed his foot down on the gas. The tires spun wildly before gripping the frozen ground. The Ford F-150 fishtailed onto the highway, racing headlong against the encroaching gloom, with the Reaper waiting solemnly in the drifting snow. Inside the truck, chaos reigned. The heater fan screamed like an engine dying mid-flight, rattling fiercely in its dashboard nest as it hurled scorching dry air into the cabin. The scent was a harsh cocktail of scorched dust and aged plastic. But to Elias, it was the essence of survival itself. Beyond the windows, the world had vanished. The headlights barely pierced a few feet ahead before the swirling blizzard swallowed the light whole, consuming the darkness. The snow no longer fell. It blasted sideways, a relentless wall of white static, mesmerizing the eyes if stared at too long. Elias gripped the steering wheel firmly at 10 and 2, his knuckles drained of color, guiding by the faint rumble strips on the road's edge and sheer instinct. "Hold tight," he whispered, eyes flickering from the road to the rearview mirror, then to the passenger seat. "Just hold on." The German Shepherd mother lay still where he had laid her, swaddled beneath his heavy field jacket. The warmth slowly melted frost on her coat, filling the cabin with the scent of damp fur and sharp iron-tinged blood. Her eyes now cracked open, amber slits fixed on him. She lacked the strength to lift her head, yet her gaze never wavered from his face, an unsettling, sentient stare. "You need a name," Elias said, voice rising above the roaring wind. He needed to hear himself speak to fend off the creeping panic. "I can't keep calling you Mama. You fought back death itself. You stood your ground." He glanced at her again. The way she rested there, damaged but unbroken, reminded him of the ancient Norse legends his grandfather once read aloud. The choosers of the fallen warriors who guided the brave into the next realm. "Valkyrie," he said the word softly, testing its weight. "That's you. You're Valkyrie." The dog exhaled softly, a sound mingling pain with faint recognition. Elias shifted focus back to the road. The truck fishtailed again as a fierce gust slammed against the side, threatening to shove them toward the guardrail and the abyss plunging 2,000 feet below. With a delicate twist of the wrist, he corrected the slide, heart pounding fiercely. "Easy," he murmured soothingly to the vehicle. Reaching with his right hand, he checked the bundle of flannel shirts where the puppies nestled against Valkyrie's belly. I needed to feel them move, to know that warmth was reaching them. His thick fingers brushed over the first tiny form. It squirmed shyly away from his touch, a sign of life, vitality. He reached for the second pup and frowned. Pulling back his hand, he plunged in deeper feeling for the runt, the smaller of the two. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Elias exhaled slowly, his gaze tearing from the road for a dreadful instant, pulling back the shirt flap. The cabin light was dim, but enough to reveal the little black ball of fur, no bigger than a soda can, limp in his palm. When Elias lifted its lip, he saw gums ghostly pale, tinged with blue. The pup wasn't breathing. "No, no, no," he chanted, the soldier in him taking command. Diagnosis: respiratory failure. Cause: hypothermia and shock. Immediate CPR required, but he was behind the wheel, 40 miles an hour on a fragile ice sheet in a whiteout. He couldn't perform chest compressions with one hand steering with the other. It was simply not possible. He faced a harrowing decision, a cruel and impossible crossroads. If he kept driving, the tiny puppy would be gone before they even cleared the mountain pass. That fragile life would turn into a cold, heartbreaking memory tucked away like a stone weighing down his soul. But if he stopped here on this treacherous road with the storm closing in, the snow could bury them beneath a thick, suffocating blanket within minutes. Or worse, a reckless car could roar around that blind corner and slam into them. The engine might seize up in the bitter cold, refusing to stir again, leaving them all to freeze in this merciless white wilderness. Pausing now would be nothing short of a death sentence. Elias glanced at Valkyrie. She'd shifted her head low, nostrils sniffing the lifeless pup. From deep within her, a mournful, haunting sound began to rise, a knowing cry. "Damn it!" Elias bellowed, his fist crashing hard against the steering wheel. He stomped on the brakes. The anti-lock brake screamed, chattering wildly under his control. The truck fishtailed the tail, sliding out, drifting dangerously toward the center line. Fighting against the relentless momentum, Elias wrestled the wheel until the truck shuddered to a crooked stop, stranded half on the shoulder, half blocking the lane. He didn't glance for other vehicles. He didn't flick on the hazard lights. There was no time for any of that. Elias yanked off his seatbelt and hurled himself over the center console. Clutching the lifeless puppy alongside the soft flannel shirt, he lifted the fragile creature into his lap. So small, so heartbreakingly delicate. His hands were made for wielding rifles and heavy tools, not for cradling something so breakable. It felt like trying to fix a watch with a hammer. "Come on, little one, stay with me," he whispered fiercely. He carefully positioned the pup on its right side, atop his denim-covered thigh. Wrapping his big hand gently around the puppy's chest, his thumb pressed lightly where its tiny heart should beat fiercely. He squeezed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the rhythm quick, desperate, yet controlled. He had to be tender but urgent. Too much force would shatter the fragile ribs, crushing the lungs he fought to revive. He leaned in close, covering the puppy's snout and mouth with his own. He blew gently, not a full breath, just a soft puff from his cheeks. He watched the little chest rise. "Breathe," he urged quietly. Then back to compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing. The puppy stayed limp and lifeless in his hands. Outside, the wind's howl grew louder, rattling the truck's frame as the snow piled rapidly against the windshield, trapping them in a frozen tomb. Elias shut everything else out. His entire world now shrank to the 4 inches of fur under his palm. 30 seconds ticked by. "Don't you give up on me?" Elias gritted through the pain, sweat beading his brow despite the bitter cold. "I pulled you out of the snow. I'm not letting you go now." He thought of Titan the moment his partner's life slipped away, the light fading from those eyes forever. The crushing weight of survival left him hollow, helpless. "Breathe." Elias's voice cracked as he shouted not just to the dog now, but to God, to the indifferent universe, to the cruel fate. that had ripped everything away. 1 minute had passed. The puppy's body chilled further, its gums turning from pale blue to a dim gray. "Please," Elias whispered brokenly, fighting back the sob swelling in his throat. "Just fight. Fight for me." He breathed another soft puff into the pup's nose, then pressed down twice as hard with his thumb, risking breaking ribs. He needed a sign, a spark of life, a miracle. 75 seconds gone. Valkyrie stirred, trying to rise, whining sharply, nudging Elias's elbow with her cold nose, desperate to reach her baby. "I'm trying, Valkyrie. I swear I'm trying," Elias gasped, heart pounding. He pressed once more. 1, 2. Then beneath his thumb, a faint tremor shivered through. Elias froze in place. He fixed his gaze on the puppy's mouth. It parted. A tiny, desperate gasp slipped out, followed by a wet, rattling wheeze. The ribcage expanded on its own once, twice. "That's it?" Elias urged softly, his hands shaking uncontrollably now. "That's it, soldier. Clear that airway." He tilted the puppy's head down gently, rubbing its back fiercely. The puppy coughed again, spewing a small bead of mucus, then let out a sharp, defiant squeal, the sweetest sound Elias had heard in half a decade. The gray pallor lifted from the gums, replaced by a flush of vibrant pink. The puppy began to squirm, thrashing its legs, seeking warmth. Elias collapsed back against the driver's seat, clutching the puppy close to his chest. He buried his face in the soft fur, closing his eyes briefly. Hot tears welled and stung at his eyelids unbidden. He exhaled a long, trembling breath. "You stubborn little fighter," he whispered. "You really had me scared there." He nestled the puppy into the flannel shirt right against Valky's warmth. The mother immediately began licking her revived pup frantically, her rough tongue cleaning away the brink of death. The puppy latched on, instinctively hungry for milk. Elias held his breath for a moment, his heart pounding fiercely in his ears. Then the harsh truth crashed back in. The windshield was buried under a thick blanket of snow. The cab was growing colder by the second. They were sitting targets. Elias scrambled back behind the wheel. He flicked on the wipers. Blades struggled against the weighty, wet snow. He slammed the truck into drive. The tires spun, whining on ice, clawing desperately for grip. "Come on, old girl," Elias urged the truck. "Hang in there, don't let me down now." The tires caught hold. The truck jerked forward, reclaiming the unseen road. This time, Elias didn't glance back. He drove with relentless fury, his jaw clenched tight. He had triumphed. For the first time in far too long, death had come for something in his care, and Elias had stared it down and said, "No." He reached out, laying his hand briefly on Valky's head. She leaned into the touch, eyes closing from fatigue. "We're going home," Elias vowed. "All of us." The truck vanished into the blizzard, a small metal sanctuary carrying 4 beating hearts through the eye of the storm. The doors of the Red Rock Veterinary Emergency Clinic didn't just open. They were thrown wide by a man driven by purpose. Elias Thorne burst into the sterile, fluorescent-lit reception, a ghost dragged up straight from the heart of the storm. Snow grease and blood plastered across him, clutching a bundle wrapped in a field jacket, a fragile world on the edge. "Help?" His voice wasn't begging. It was an order. It cut through the waiting room's quiet hum, startling a young woman clutching a cat carrier. "I need a trauma team immediately." Behind the raised reception counter, the nurse's eyes widened. She hit the buzzer, and the double doors snapped open right away. Dr. Silas Vance emerged, an arresting contrast to Elias, a tall, impossibly thin man, glasses perched on a sharp nose. His scrub greens hung loosely, but his gloved hands moved with the chilling precision of a bomb technician diffusing disaster. He didn't ask a single question. He noticed the dog's gray gums in Elias's arms and pointed sharply toward a gurney. "Treatment room 1. Now. Move," Vance commanded with a voice cold and clipped. Elias carefully laid Valkyrie down, his jacket falling open, unveiling 2 trembling puppies clinging desperately to her side. For a fleeting moment, a flash of shock crossed Vance's eyes behind his glasses before he snapped into action. "Get the incubator ready for the newborns," Vance barked at the paramedic. "Start a warm, lactated Ringer's fluid line on the mother immediately. But prepare a crash cart on standby. Her pulse is hanging by a thread, she's slipping fast." Elias was gently pushed back toward the hallway as the medical team swarmed over Valkyrie. He tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him softly. "You can't go in there, sir. Let them do their work." Elias stood motionless, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, his hands trembling and now completely empty. The rush of adrenaline that had driven him down the mountain now drained away, replaced by a chilling, hollow fear that settled deep inside. Through the rectangular observation window, he watched as they inserted tubes into Valkyrie, shaving a small patch on her leg, hooking her up to monitors that immediately began beeping with a frantic, uneven cadence. Helpless, he retreated to the waiting room and sank into a hard plastic chair. The silence here was heavier than any storm. It was the unbearable stillness of waiting for a life-altering verdict. 20 minutes later, the front doors slid open again, ushering in a gust of frigid air, along with a sheriff's deputy brushing snow off his Stetson. Deputy Harrison was young, his face unmarked by many winters, yet his expression was unexpectedly grave. He spotted Elias and approached, notebook in hand. "Mr. Thorne," the deputy asked quietly. "Dispatch said you called in the accident site up on the pass."
"Stay."
"Mile marker 108, Elias confirmed, avoiding the deputy's gaze and staring at his worn boots. "I did. The road crew missed the site." "They missed the dogs," Harrison said somberly. "But they found the driver earlier. We just got the ID back from the chip on the male dog you described." Elias looked up sharply. "Who was he?" Harrison sighed, closing his notebook. "Nos." "The chip was registered to Corporal James Miller, Army Ranger discharged 6 years ago." The deputy hesitated, discomfort flashing across his face. "He didn't have a permanent address, sir. He was living out of that sedan. All his belongings were inside that car." Elias felt the air leave the room. A homeless veteran, a ranger. A man who had survived war only to perish alone on a frozen Colorado curve. His family, his pack, left to freeze at his side. "No next of kin?" Elias asked, his voice thick with grief. "None listed, just the dogs," Harrison confirmed. "Technically, the animals now belong to the state. Animal control will want to—" Elias cut him off, a steel returning to his voice as he locked eyes with the deputy. "No, they're not property. They're survivors. I am taking responsibility for them." Harrison studied the old Marine blood staining his shirt, fire burning in his eyes, and slowly lowered his pen. "I'll note in the report that they were transferred to emergency care. Good luck, Mr. Thorne." As the deputy turned to leave, Elias's phone buzzed sharply against his hip. The unexpected cheerful sound was out of place on a night like this. The screen lit up with a name. Elias stared down at it vividly, imagining the dining room table, the roast turkey, the cranberry sauce, the empty chair at the head of the table. Without replying, he pressed answer and held the phone to his ear, voice silent. "Dad." Clara's voice was tight, trembling on the edge of tears. "Please tell me you're not still up there on that mountain." Her voice cracked, teetering on the brink of tears. "You can't still be up there on that mountain, not like this." "I'm not on the mountain," Elias muttered softly. "Then where are you?" Her voice trembled with frustration and pain. "We waited for an entire hour. The boys made you a card. Every year, Dad. Every single year you choose the dead over those still breathing. How long will you carry this burden? How long will you punish us all?" The words hit like shattered glass. Punish. Elias rose and moved to the observation window. Inside the treatment room, Dr. Vance's voice was sharp, shouting at a nurse. Valky's body twitched on the table. "I'm not punishing anyone, Clara," Elias said, his voice cracking with anguish. "I'm at the vet clinic." "The vet? Why, you don't even have a dog anymore. Titan is gone, Dad. He's gone." "I know he's gone." Elias snapped, startling the nurse at the front desk. Then he softened, pressing his forehead against the cold glass as his breath faltered. "I found a family. Clara," he whispered. "A rescue family frozen suffering in the snow. I couldn't walk away." Inside, the heart monitor's frantic beeping shifted, turned sharp, high-pitched, and then flattened out. Beep! Elias's blood ran icy cold as the flat line glowed steady and unforgiving on the screen. He watched Dr. Vance drop his stethoscope in defeat. Dad, what's happening?" Clara's voice trembled with fear. "I have to go." Elias breathed, barely audible. "I have to go." The call ended. Inside, Dr. Vance glanced at the clock. "A time of death," he murmured. His shoulders slumped with sorrow. The dog had lost too much blood. Her core temperature was fading. The heart had simply given in. "No!" The voice shattered the silence from the hallway. Elias slammed his palm against the glass. The sound echoed like a gunshot cutting through the stillness. Dr. Vance spun around sharply. He saw Elias Thorne, not broken and defeated, but fierce and unyielding like a general commanding his troops. Elias's trembling finger jabbed at the table, then at Dr. Vance. "Don't call it!" Elias roared through the thick glass. "Do not give up! Bring her back!" Vance hesitated, his gaze flickering between the flat line and the burning desperation in Elias's eyes. He noticed the blood staining Elias's shirt, the raw grit it took just for him to stand there. Vance clenched his jaw. "Charge paddles to 20 joules, he shouted to the nurse. "Push 1 milligram of epinephrine! Clear!" Elias watched, breathless hands still pressed against the glass as if willing his energy to cross the divide. Vance slammed the defibrillator paddles hard against Valky's chest. The dog's body arched violently, then collapsed back onto the table. "Bab!" the nurse called out anxiously. "Charge to 30, clear!" Vance barked again. Thump. Another violent arch, another slump. The relentless tone dragged on an echo of doom. Vance stared at the monitor, shaking his head. He reached for the switch to end it. "Come on, Valkyrie," Elias whispered, forehead pressed against the glass, eyes squeezed tight. "Corporal Miller didn't make it. You have to complete the mission." Suddenly a blip, then silence, then a faint beep. Vance froze. Beep, beep, beep. A fragile sinus rhythm, weak and chaotic, but alive. "We have a pulse." The nurse cried out. "Blood pressure is rising." Vance sprang into action, barking orders to stabilize her. But Elias wasn't listening. He was locked on the table. Slowly, impossibly, the German shepherd tilted her head. Her eyes, heavy with sedation and pain, fluttered open. She didn't look at the doctors or the harsh lights, she looked beyond them. She gazed through the glass eyes, locking onto Elias with a haunting depth of recognition. Amid the blurry fog of drug-induced stupor, she found the shadow who had pulled her from the snow. She held his eyes for a brief, silent moment, an unspoken agreement between two warriors fighting to survive, before her eyelids closed once more, not in death, but in rest. Elias slid down the wall until he collapsed onto the floor, sitting in the sterile hallway, his hands covering his face, tears flowing quietly as the steady, rhythmic beeping of the monitor played the most beautiful melody he'd ever known. 3 days later, the storm finally broke. The sky above Denver stretched endless and piercingly blue, the kind of blue that made the snow-capped Rockies appear like jagged fangs biting the horizon. Yet inside the Red Rock Veterinary Clinic, the air was thick, weighed down by the steady hum of machines and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Elias sat in the recovery room, a place he'd practically called home since Thanksgiving. In the pen before him, Valkyrie stood, still thin, her ribs visible beneath the shaved patch where the ultrasound had been taken, but standing strong. Her ears pricked high, swiveling like radar dishes, catching every footstep echoing down the hall. At her paws, the 2 puppies known in Elias's heart as Alpha and Bravo were curled up in a tangled heap of towels, sleeping soundly. Alpha, the one Elias had breathed life into, was already the bigger of the 2, twitching softly in his sleep, as if chasing dreams of unseen rabbits. "They look good," a voice said from the doorway. Elias didn't turn, recognizing Dr. Vance's voice immediately. "They're eating," he added. Valkyrie took the gruel this morning without growling at the tech. "That's the problem?" Mr. Thorne Vance's tone was apologetic. "She growled at the tech yesterday and the day before." Elias stiffened. Turning, he saw Vance standing beside a woman Elias didn't know. She was sharp-featured, clad in the tan and green uniform of the State Department of Agriculture's Animal Control Division. Her name tag read M. Kincaid. She looked to be in her late 30s, her hair pulled tightly into a severe ponytail that sharpened her features. Holding a clipboard like a shield, she asked Mr. Thorne. Her voice was professional, cool, but not unkind. "I'm Mara Kincaid. I'm the case manager for this district." Elias rose his knees, creaking, straightening his shoulders, instinctively placing himself protectively between the woman and the cage. "I know who you are, and I know why you're here. You're here to tell me I can take them home." Mara sighed, a small sound that softened just slightly her rigid stance. "I wish I could. Dr. Vance says you saved their lives, and that's truly commendable. But there's a situation. The situation is their owner is dead," Elias said flatly. "I'm stepping in. It's not that simple." Mara stepped closer, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "These dogs were discovered at the scene of a fatal accident. The mother has shown signs of guarding her resources and aggression toward medical staff. Since the owner is deceased, no vaccination records exist, and she suffered violent trauma. The state mandates a 30-day quarantine and a behavioral assessment. She was protecting her pups." Elias argued, voice rising. "She was starving and freezing. That's not aggression, that's survival." "That's for us to decide," Mara said firmly. "She must be transferred to the state animal control facility. We need to conduct tests for rabies distemper and evaluate her behavior. If after 30 days she's deemed adoptable, you'll be able to apply. But for now, she's legally under state care. She's evidence." Elias scoffed, a harsh bark breaking from his throat. "She's a grieving soul. You lock her in a concrete cell for a whole month, and you'll shatter her spirit. Those are the regulations, Mr. Thorne. I can't bend them, not even for someone like you." Mara met his gaze, her eyes softening just a fraction. "If you truly want to help her trust us to do our job, fight this and you'll be blacklisted, never allowed to adopt her down the line. Do you understand?" Elias clenched his jaw until his teeth ached. His eyes found Valkyrie, who watched him intently, head tilted, patiently waiting for his command. 30 days, Elias said, the words tasting bitter as ash. 30 days, Mara confirmed, starting today. The transport van waits outside. Elias drove home first, telling himself he had to ready the house. But deep down, he just needed to escape the clinic before he lost control and lashed out at an official. His cabin sat perched on a ridge overlooking the tree line, a sturdy home crafted from rugged logs and stone built by his own hands when he and his wife Sarah first made this place their own. It was a beautiful home, yet an achingly lonely one. Elias stepped inside. The stale air still held the cold from the days he'd been away. He let his keys drop onto the counter, the metal's clang echoing through the quiet kitchen, emphasizing the stillness. It was painfully loud. For 3 days, his world had been the steady beep of heart monitors, the soft squeak of sneakers against linoleum, and the low protective growl of a mother's love. Now there was only silence broken by the wind scrapping against the windows. Elias made his way to the living room. On the mantel, above the fireplace, sat a shadow box made of rich cherry wood. Inside, resting on black velvet, lay the medals earned from a lifetime spent in the dirt and dust. The Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and beside them a neatly folded American flag and a worn leather collar. Titan's collar. The leather was smooth from use, still bearing the faint imprint of the dog's neck. Elias lifted the box down and settled into his armchair, the leather groaning beneath him. From his pocket he pulled a rag and began polishing the glass, even though it wasn't dusty. His eyes lingered on the collar. He remembered the weight of the leash in his grip. He remembered Titan pressing close to his leg before a breach. That silent bond that said, "I've got your back." "I thought I just wanted to save them," Elias whispered to the empty room. "I thought it was just about doing good, but it was more than that." When Valkyrie looked at him through the glass, when Alpha took that first breath in his hands, Elias felt something he hadn't since the IED took Titan away. He felt needed. He felt part of a team. He wasn't looking for just a pet. He wasn't after a companion to sit beside the fire. He wanted a battle buddy. He wanted the mission. The cabin's silence weighed down on him, heavy and smothering. It wasn't peace. It was an empty void. And suddenly, with terrifying clarity, he knew if Valkyrie and those pups vanished into the system, that void would consume him entirely. He rose, setting the shadow box firmly back on the mantel, with a resolute thud. Not today, he vowed. The clinic's parking lot lay cold and unforgiving. The sun offered no warmth against the cruel, biting wind. A white van branded with the state emblem emblazoned on its side idled silently near the entrance. Its rear doors swung open to reveal a row of stainless steel cages, harsh prison-like cells that held captive souls within. Mara stood beside this van, deep in conversation with a handler, a burly man clad in a heavy jacket clutching a catch-pole with steady hands. The catch-pole was a long metal rod tipped with a wire loop, engineered to snare fierce animals by the neck, protecting the handler from harm. Elias pulled his truck to a stop and leapt out. Just then, Dr. Vance appeared, carrying Valkyrie through a side door. The instant Valkyrie spotted the van, she froze. Her hackles rose a ridge of dark fur prickling along her spine in silent alarm. A low, resonant growl rumbled deep in her throat, vibrating through the air. "Steady," the handler cautioned, stepping forward with the catch-pole raised. "Let's get the loop on her," came the command. In a flash, Valkyrie snapped her jaws shut just inches from the pole's grasp. She retreated, placing herself squarely between the handler and the crate, holding Alpha and Bravo, which Veta was guarding. With a fierce bark, she issued a raw, guttural warning. "She's escalating," Mara alerted, reaching for her radio. "We might have to sedate her." "No sedation," Elias yelled, sprinting across the lot without hesitation. "Put that damn pole away!" The handler spun around, startled. "Sir, stand back. This animal is dangerous." "She's not dangerous. She's terrified." Elias didn't stop. He strode past Mara, past the handler with the threatening pole. He stepped directly into the snap zone of the raging German shepherd. Valkyrie bared her teeth, her eyes wide and wild with fear and fury. Ready to rip apart anyone who dared come near, she stood her ground. Elias froze 3 feet away, unshaken, unafraid. His voice never rose. He lowered his posture, easing his shoulders into calm, and met her gaze squarely. "Valkyrie," he said, voice low, steady, commanding. "Stand down." The dog paused, ears twitching in recognition. She heard that voice, the one from the truck from the storm. "Eyes on me," Elias ordered softly, drawing her in. Valkyrie's growl faded into silence. She glanced at the handler, then back to Elias, releasing a confused, high-pitched whine. "I know," Elias murmured, stepping closer. "I know you hate this, but we have to move now." He reached out, and the handler gasped, expecting claws to strike, but Valkyrie did not bite. Instead, she stretched her neck forward, pressing her damp nose gently into Elias's palm, exhaling a heavy sigh as her muscles melted. In that moment, she surrendered to him. Elias clipped a simple leash onto her collar and turned to the handler. "Open the cage. I'll handle it." The stunned handler lowered the pole and nodded. Elias led Valkyrie to the back of the van. She hesitated at the cold metal ramp, eyes fixed on him. Amber orbs searching his face, asking a question that shattered his heart. "Are you coming with me up?" Elias encouraged gently. Valkyrie obeyed, leaping into the cage without hesitation. She spun around immediately, pressing her face against the bars, waiting for him to follow. Elias lingered, resting his hand on the wire mesh, feeling her warm breath ghost across his fingers. "I'm coming back for you," he vowed, voice thick with emotion. 30 days. Hold the line. I promise I'll be back." The handler slammed the cage door with a harsh metallic clang, then shut the van's double doors, cutting off their connection in a final echoing seal. The engine roared to life, and the white van sped away, gravel crunching beneath its tires. Elias stood alone in the empty parking lot, a solitary figure. The biting wind tore at his jacket, trying to throw him off balance, but he remained rooted, unmoved. He watched the van shrink into the distance, a tiny white speck, vanishing down the endless, unforgiving highway. Silence crept back, attempting to clutch his heart in its icy grasp once more. Yet beneath that stillness, something fiercer stirred a blazing, resolute fire. He was no longer just a grieving widower. He was a man pressed by time, driven by purpose. The waiting stretched on a slow, grinding torment. 3 long weeks had slipped by since the van faded down the highway. 21 days of unyielding silence. Colorado's winter had deepened, burying Elias's cabin beneath nearly 3 feet of snow, transforming the world into a stark prison of white and gray. But Elias Thorne was no man to sit and surrender. He had used this time to prepare. He strengthened the perimeter fence, hammering frozen posts into the earth until his hands were blistered and bleeding. He built a heated kennel run on the back porch, insulating it with the precision and passion of a combat engineer fortifying a bunker. He told himself it was for their safe return, yet deep within the darkest recesses of his mind, where old battles still haunted him, he feared he was merely constructing a memorial to yet another defeat. The call came sharply at 11:43 p.m. Elias sat in his armchair, a glass of untouched whiskey resting beside him, gazing into the dying embers of the fire. When the phone buzzed, it shattered the silence like a gunshot. He grabbed it instantly. "Thorne, Mr. Thorne, it's Mara Kincaid." Her voice was raw, tight, breathless, stripped of the composed professionalism she'd worn earlier. In the background, chaos spilled forth. Shouting, slamming doors, frantic barking. Elias stood tightening his grip on the phone until it groaned. "What happened? Is she sick?" he asked. Mara's voice trembled. "It's worse. 10 minutes ago we had an incident. A relief handler. A rookie didn't follow protocol. He tried to enter the run to separate the pups for their second round of distemper shots." Elias closed his eyes, already seeing the scene unfold. He touched those pups in his mind. He grabbed Alpha by the scruff. Mara rushed on. Valkyrie didn't warn him. She didn't growl. She just attacked, took him down. "Elias, it's a level 4 bite. Deep punctures across the forearm muscle torn. He's in the ambulance now. She was protecting her son." Elias shouted, "It doesn't matter." Mara's voice cracked with sorrow. "Not to the law. A dog causing hospitalization is instantly labeled vicious level 1 by state statutes. The director has already signed the order." "What order?" Elias asked, dread settling in despite knowing the answer. The cold from the window seeped into his very bones. "Euthanasia," Mara whispered. "Mandatory within 48 hours. They're calling it a public safety risk. They plan to put Alpha and Bravo up for general adoption tomorrow morning. And Valkyrie?" The words faltered. "I'm sorry, Elias, it's over." Then the line went dead. Elias stared at the silent phone. For a long moment, nothing stirred, only a vast frozen numbness. Then fury ignited within. Not the hot flare of road rage, but a cold, sharp, deadly fury. The steely wrath of a soldier driven beyond all limits. The fury he felt now was the very same seething rage that consumed him in Kandahar when the dust settled and Titan was lost. They planned to kill her simply because she was a mother, because she stood firm and did her duty. Elias moved toward the gun safe nestled in the corner of the bedroom. His hand steadied free from trembling. This was no longer a moment of panic, it was a mission. He spun the dial. Click, click, click. The heavy steel door swung wide open. Reaching beyond the hunting rifles, he claimed the 1911 pistol from the top shelf. The magazine was fully loaded. He slapped the slide back, chambering around. The sharp, metallic click-click echoed as the only sound inside the quiet house. His mind wasn't tangled with thoughts of law or prison. All he focused on was the promise he made to her. He had looked into that dog's eyes and vowed he would return. Sliding the gun into his waistband, he grabbed his keys. He tore down the mountain roads like a man possessed the truck, sliding around curves, headlights piercing the darkness. He dialed his lawyer's number, a voice he hadn't heard since settling Sarah's estate. The call went straight to voicemail. He hung up and tried again. After several attempts, a groggy voice finally answered. Elias, it's past midnight. State Animal Control has a kill order on a dog. You need an injunction fast. Whoa, hold on. A kill order. If it's under vicious dog laws, Elias, an injunction isn't possible. No judge would sign off at this hour. Not for a dog that's already hospitalized a man. It's a dead end. Then I'll break through. Any door, Elias growled, tossing the phone onto the seat beside him. 20 minutes later, he arrived at the facility gates. A vast complex encircled by chain-link fences crowned with razor wire. Floodlights bathed the concrete yard in a harsh, unnatural glare. Elias slammed the truck into park right before the main gate, blocking any access. Stepping out, the cold air hit his face, his hand resting close to the grip of the 1911 concealed under his jacket. He didn't know what he'd do next, storm the place, hold them at gunpoint, or die fighting. In that moment, none of it mattered. The PTSD quiet for months thundered in his ears. A wild symphony of helicopter blades and screams echoed inside him. He was back in the war zone. The enemy lay just beyond that gate. Elias, stop! The sharp command cut through the shadows near the guard shack. Doctor, Silas Vance stepped into the faint light face etched with fear. He wore a coat over pajamas, shivering violently, his breath misting in the cold air. Move aside, Silas Elias warned, refusing to halt. I know what you're trying to do, Vance shouted, raising hands, palms open as a plea. I saw your truck coming. I knew you'd be here. Don't. If you draw that weapon, you lose everything. The dogs, your freedom, all Titan fought for. Elias stopped just feet from the doctor. They're going to kill her. I know Vance said teeth chattering, but this isn't the answer. Look. Vance pointed to the side door of the administrative building where Mara Conincade was stepping out. She clutched a thick file against her chest. She looked worn, her eyes rimmed with red exhaustion. She walked straight toward the gate between Elias and Vance. She caught sight of the bulge beneath Elias's jacket, the desperation in his eyes, the look of a man teetering on the edge of the abyss. Yet she didn't flinch. You want to save her? Mara's voice was steady, though trembling with emotion. Then put the gun down and pick up a pen. Elias hesitated as the red fog in his vision began to lift just enough to clear his mind. What do you mean? There's no legal room to maneuver, Mara said swiftly, her voice cutting through the chain-link fence. The law is unwavering, yet there's a sliver of hope, a pilot program greenlit last year, but never brought to life subsection 14B of the Veterans Rehabilitation Act. She pushed the folder through a crack in the fence. It's known as the K-9 Reintegration for Veterans Initiative. Mara went on. It grants a certified military handler the right to reclaim a high-risk K-9 for a specialized rehabilitation journey. But the conditions are brutal. A secure facility, 2 decades of handling expertise, and a master trainer certificate. I meet all those requirements. Elias said, his heart pounding fiercely. Mara gave a nod. But there's a heavy price, a massive one. By signing this, you shoulder total liability. If Valkyrie ever bites again, anyone at all, it's not just losing the dog. It means prison. Charges of felony negligence, losing your pension, your home. You bear every fault Valkyrie's ever had, Elias. He stared at the file. His gaze then shifted back to the cold, gray concrete shelter where Valkyrie paced in a cage waiting for the final shot. The risk pressed down on him. He was 55, secured home peaceful existence, and now he was ready to throw it all away for a dog who had brutally attacked a man. He didn't hesitate. Open the gate, Elias commanded. Mara punched in the code. The heavy gate creaked open with a grim, mechanical sound. Elias strode to the hood of his truck. He accepted the pen Mara offered, but didn't bother scanning the fine print. No clause inspection. He flipped to the last page, rested the paper on the cold metal hood, and signed his name thick and fierce, Elias J. Thorne, USMC Ret. He handed the folder back to Mara. "Bring my dog home," he said. Mara's eyes flicked from the signature up to him, a tear trailing down the dust on her cheek. "I'm risking everything for this. Elias, I'm overriding the director's orders." "Then we better make every second count," Dr. Vance said quietly, stepping forward with calm resolve. "I'll sign off as the supervising vet. I'll personally verify the quarantine setup at his cabin." Mara nodded, then sprinted back toward the building. Elias leaned against his truck, adrenaline fading fast, leaving his body trembling. He slipped his hand under his jacket and pulled out the old 1911, ejecting the magazine with practiced ease. He dumped the bullets onto the passenger seat. He came prepared to end a life, but instead, he had just committed to saving his own. 10 minutes passed and the side door creaked open. Mara stepped out leading Valkyrie. Now muzzled, the heavy leather restraint was locked firmly around her snout. Her posture was broken, head-bowed, tail tucked tight between her legs. She seemed defeated, but as soon as she caught the scent of pine and familiar worn flannel, her ears lifted sharply. Elias knelt in the snow. "Come here, girl." Valkyrie lunged forward on the leash, pulling Mara over the slick ice. She pressed her muzzled face against Elias's neck, a muffled whimper escaping like a soft, heart-wrenching cry. Elias gathered her close, wrapping his arms around her neck, his face buried deep in her fur. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely into her ear. "I told you. I've got you." Mara handed him 2 carrier crates labeled Alpha and Bravo. "Get them out of here," she urged, glancing nervously at the security cameras. "Before the director wakes and realizes what I've done." Elias loaded the crates into the truck bed, then opened the passenger door for Valkyrie. Without hesitation, she climbed in. She leapt inside, curling up on the seat, still scented with the memory of her rescue. Elias climbed in his eyes, meeting Vance and Mara standing beneath the cold floodlights. "Thank you," he whispered. "Hold your gratitude for now." Mara warned, her expression somber and resolute. "You've got one chance, Elias. Just one. If she sinks a tooth into anyone, it's over, game finished for both of you." Elias nodded slowly, understanding the weight. He shifted the truck into gear and rolled through the gate, leaving the prison's shadow behind. His hand brushed the legal file resting on the dashboard. It was a death sentence held at bay. But when his gaze met Valkyrie's trusting amber eyes, Elias knew he would sign that paper 1,000 times over. The cabin perched on the ridge hadn't been a home in a long time. It was now his command post. Elias Thorne had once led platoons across endless deserts and trained recruits through the grueling swamps of Paris Island, but never had he been responsible for a squad like this. His world shrank to the fortified perimeter. He'd built the ever-burning wood stove, and the 3 souls who tracked his every move. The routine was relentless. 0500 hours wake-up call, 0515 perimeter inspection, 0530 feed time. Elias treated this ritual like a military operation because out there, in the wild, food was survival. Here in his house, eating meant you earned it through discipline. "Sit," Elias commanded, holding a metallic bowl filled with high-protein kibble. In the heart of the living room sat Valkyrie. Though still thin, her muscles were wound tight like steel springs beneath her patchy coat, shaved raw by the vet's hands. Her amber eyes locked onto the bowl pupils wide, while a low growl rumbled from her